In my last video, I began to discuss this topic of Holy Communion and our goal as Catholics to live in Holy Communion, not just to receive Holy Communion. I think today this problem, this one-dimensional understanding of the word communion is really apparent. It's like as if being Catholic consists entirely in receiving the host and nothing more. I'd call this the just have to have the host syndrome. I'm Catholic, so I get the host. Doesn't matter if I go to Mass once a week, once a year. Doesn't matter if I go to confession. Doesn't matter if I even pray, because receiving my first Holy Communion entitles me to receive any Holy Communion anytime I want, whenever, wherever, however. This syndrome isn't new. It's been around forever. Its typical instantiation is the person who receives the host and then makes haste for the parking lot, or the preference of some for communion service over Mass because it's shorter and I still get the host. I've even heard of places where the men will actually stand outside the church smoking cigarettes until after the consecration, and then they'll come in just to receive communion. I've actually had people in confession confess not receiving communion, as if not receiving communion was the sin, not going to Mass. Oftentimes a priest will ask a penitent, if they've confessed any mortal sins, have you received Holy Communion with these sins on your heart? Yes, Father, I have. Sometimes they don't even know that they say it like, yep, of course I have. Well, no, you can't. You can't receive Holy Communion if you're in the state of mortal sin. It doesn't take a mathematician to realize either that the length of the line for communion and the length of the line for confession are not proportionate. But I think it comes down to this idea that I have to have the host. Just give me the host. Or this idea that that's what it means to be Catholic. I think the current pandemic has only exacerbated this problem. I've seen posts on Facebook saying some stuff like, I would drive anywhere to get communion. Are there any churches who are still giving it out? I know a priest who a parishioner called him and said, Father, can I just get some hosts and I can do communion services in my own house? All sorts of ways to creatively get communion, which don't acknowledge the fact that the Mass is the place for communion and the priest is the person to give communion. This is understandable. These sentiments, we're longing for Jesus, and that's good. We should long for Jesus. We should always desire to receive Jesus in Holy Communion more frequently than we're physically able to. But at the same time, we should remain at peace when we're unable to. We should obey those who limit our ability and have discretion of those ways in which would actually be inappropriate to receive Holy Communion. On that note, there have been parishes here in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, who were boasting drive-through communion, communion takeout style. One parish was going so far as to hand the hosts on a styrofoam plate through car windows. The styrofoam plate was not returned. It was presumably not purified. There could be fragments of the host on that and discarded, just throw it away. These aren't the way that we treat the Blessed Sacrament. As good as it is to receive, there's still a way in which we have to, a fittingness we have to maintain. But I think that the sentiment comes down to this identity crisis of, well, who am I if I can't receive the host? What do I do? So I want to make a distinction here, because I've been saying the host as opposed to the Eucharist, or as opposed to the Blessed Sacrament. And I say that because it's actually possible to receive a dead sacrament, a lifeless, graceless sacrament. We rarely speak about this distinction, but in theology, it's true. A couple could be married while in a state of grace, in the state of mortal sin, which would be a mortal sin to receive that sacrament in that state of mortal sin. And so they would not receive the grace of the sacrament, the matrimonial charity to love your spouse unconditionally, though they would still be bound by the sacrament. They would still be married till death do they part, but without grace until they go to confession and confess their sins. So too with the Eucharist, it's possible to receive the host and not receive any grace. The extreme, obviously, is the person who receives in a state of mortal sin. They don't receive the grace of that Holy Communion, of that sacrament. So don't get me wrong, the person who receives the host in the state of mortal sin still touches Jesus. It's just not the tender touch of Mary Magdalene. It's the hateful scourge of the Roman centurion. The one, though in a state of grace, who receives casually and not thinking about it, receives little or no grace. He just receives the host. It's like he, brushed Jesus, shoulder as they're walking through the crowd. Lots of people touched Jesus while he was alive, and not all of them received grace. Not all of them were converted. The saints say that there's enough grace in one Holy Communion to make us all saints. So why aren't we all saints? This is the same condemnation that the non-Catholics give to Catholics, right? They say, if that's really Jesus, then why aren't you holier? Well, because all too often we receive the host and fail to receive the God who is in the host. Receiving the host is the beginning, not the end. And actually, there's a prelude even to that. So we'll stop there for today. We'll continue in the next video.